Tonight, the spotlight in accused serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer's case centers on Ohio, as police dig for the remains of what could be Dahmer's first victim of 13 years ago. Meantime, Milwaukee police say Dahmer now admits to killing 17 people. They've now identified 15 of those victims as memorial services for some of those victims have begun. Good evening, I'm Carol Marie.
And I'm Joan Esposito. Ron Majors is off tonight. Let's go to Milwaukee, where Channel 5's Ray Suarez is live with the latest. Ray?
Joan, the two latest victims to be identified were two young Milwaukee men. It's been a week since the world first discovered what Jeffrey Dahmer was hiding in his apartment building, and tonight, anger toward Milwaukee police showed itself in a church near Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. The mother of Oliver Lacey stood silently, trying to gain her composure before this huge audience. Her son, who grew up in Oak Park, was one of the first identified victims of Jeffrey Dahmer.
And I'm asking for everybody's help. Everybody. That's all right. To find out what happened to our children.
The rising anger among many Milwaukee blacks was already here to begin with. Then the murderous career of Jeffrey Dahmer, who preyed on several young blacks, only sharpened that anger.
From the Milwaukee Police Department, when all these brothers get the warrant checks, what happened to Jeffrey? Okay, where was his warrant check?
The Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church was hot, airless. Milwaukee Alderman Michael McGee suggested the meeting be moved downtown.
So what I'm suggesting is that we meet again in part two of this at 6 o'clock at City Hall. And if they don't give it to us, we'll take City Hall that day.
After a week, this murder story is still turning up new heartbreak. Human remains found near Dahmer's grandmother's home in West Allis, Wisconsin, were identified as Richard Guerrero. And the Thomas family now knows 24-year-old David is dead, though they have no remains, only a photograph taken by Jeffrey Dahmer.
Either he was dead at that moment or he was heavily sedated.
Families at first simply stunned are now hit with the full impact of their grief. Today was Tony Hughes's funeral. He disappeared in May. And tomorrow morning's editions of the Milwaukee Sentinel will report that Jeffrey Dahmer, in his probation records anyway, it's reported there that Dahmer was abused by a neighbor boy when he was only 8 years old. That reported by Dahmer's father when he was interviewed about Jeffrey's deviant sexual behavior. Carol and Joan?
Thank you, Ray. In Ohio, investigators tonight are trying to determine if the more than 50 bone fragments they found today near Dahmer's boyhood home are human. Mike Strelo has the story.
These are helping authorities piece together a grisly crime.
With continued effort, we may very well be able, with all the information we have, to put together the fact of who those bones indeed belong to.
Dr. Cox says all of the fragments were small, smaller than a human hand. Dahmer told police he smashed the bones with a sledgehammer and scattered them on the property.
That is what's making this so difficult.
Along with searching the grounds, authorities also went through the two-story ranch house where Dahmer used to live. Beneath the house, in a crawl space, they found some more bone fragments and some other gruesome evidence. A blood-stained handprint and other blood samples were found in the crawl space. Dahmer told police he killed Stephen Hicks upstairs and then cut up his body down here. Prosecutors believe they have enough evidence to issue charges.
We are still going to allow the Milwaukee cases to go forward in their normal course, and then after they are completed at some later date, maybe not to their total completion, but at some later date, then we hope to have Mr. Dahmer back here in Summit County.
This quiet neighborhood suddenly became the focus of national attention. Some residents left their homes for the day. Others, like these young girls, tried to make everyone's job a little easier.
It's better for us, so we're doing something else instead of thinking about, what they're doing back there.
Lena and Stacy say they'll be open for business again tomorrow morning when searchers return to resume their gruesome but important task.
From Ohio, that was Mike Strelo reporting. Investigators say it will take 3 or 4 days to finish their task.
The question that some people are asking tonight is whether Dahmer is telling everything. Did he only murder in states without a death penalty, or are there more victims elsewhere? Phil Walters looked into that question tonight and has this report.
All of them happened in the state of Wisconsin, except one that occurred in the state of Ohio.
And you're convinced of that?
Well, you know, convinced as a lawyer can be.
And how, his lawyer asks, could he be so sophisticated as to play the death penalty laws? But could Dahmer limit his killings to just 2 states, years apart, with no murders in between? A psychiatrist who has studied dozens of serial killers doubts it.
My impression is it's not complete. It would be very unusual, again, for a serial murderer to concentrate all of his victims in only one state with perhaps one in another state.
And there has been serious analysis suggesting Dahmer is hoping for a conviction in Wisconsin so that if he is later convicted in a death penalty state like Illinois, he cannot be executed.
I don't think there's any chance that being convicted first in Wisconsin would insulate Mr. Dahmer from the death penalty.
Charles Hoffman, a state public defender here, specializes in death penalty cases.
If he's indicted in a state where there is a death penalty, he can be tried and executed. And to attribute that kind of rational thought to Mr. Dahmer, I just don't think is right.
And will Dahmer claim insanity or mental incompetence?
I want to find out what this young man's mind was all about, and I have retained services of certain professionals to make that inquiry, and that's what we're doing.
Phil Walters, Channel 5 News.
Dahmer's attorney says his client continues to cooperate with investigators.
Jeffrey Dahmer became a soldier when he enlisted in the Army in 1980. For 18 months, he was stationed in Germany, and while there, bunked with Billy Capshaw. Capshaw, who is serving a 1-year sentence for negligent homicide in an Arkansas prison, describes Dahmer as a cold, maniacal person who liked to fight.
He'd go to bed, and if he was drinking, I'd have to wait until I went to bed. You know, I have to wait till he was totally passed out or asleep before I could get into my bunk because the chase would be on again.
Capshaw also says that Dahmer often talked about his dislike for children.